Hello, welcome back to the Harmony Inspired Health Podcast. Today we're diving into the Ayurvedic wisdom of graceful aging, honoring the different life stages and how we can create ease and balance as women in a fast-paced world. My guest today is Hannah Levin, the founder of Heartfelt Wellbeing, an Ayurvedic practitioner, yoga teacher, artist, and educator. With a background in both Ayurveda and modern education, Hannah's mission is to alleviate unnecessary suffering by guiding women toward optimal health and well-being through her online coaching programs and retreats. Welcome to the podcast, Hannah.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation because it has come up a lot recently in conversations that I'm having with other women and other women around my age and a little bit older. And it's very fitting because tomorrow I'm actually turning 41. So at the time of this recording anyway. And I feel like once you get into your 40s, you're like, I really take notice of the process of aging a lot more and am more conscious of it. And so I definitely think this will be a really wonderful conversation to have with you. How did you get into Ayurveda?
Great question. It was kind of a progressive, universal push. I think I grew up in a really health conscious family, but I struggled with a lot of health issues starting from when I was young. I had chronic allergies. Turns out my childhood bedroom was moldy. And so I had a lot of stuff that just stemmed from that. Like now I can look back and just see this progression. Without going into all the details, by the time I was in my years, I was a yoga teacher, but I was struggling with a lot of health issues and mostly Vata imbalances, which maybe we'll get into more. I know you cover those in other podcasts too. But as a yoga teacher, a lot of people were coming to me and asking me questions like, I'm having trouble with sleep, or I have digestive issues, or do you know anything about, menstrual cycle regulation or whatever? And be like, why do they think I know anything? I'm just a yoga teacher. And I knew that yoga had a really great effect for me on my mental well-being, and definitely helped my physical body too. But by that point, I was about 20 pounds heavier than I am now. I was just like, there's this whole other science and this whole other realm of knowledge that's connected to yoga. But it really took me getting a precancerous diagnosis, which kind of like smacked me in the head. And I was like, so I was told by a doctor that if I didn't have, this was high grade cervical dysplasia that I was diagnosed with. And so I was told that if I didn't have 70% of my cervix removed, that I was going to die, which is what a doctor told me. And it really scared me, but it also got me in connection with a deep belief that I have, which I think goes back to my childhood and parents doing more natural healing approaches, that I believe the body can heal itself. And it's simply a process of giving the body the support that it needs to be able to heal versus cutting out parts of the body. So that really put me on the path to healing myself. I didn't end up having that surgery. Excuse me. We are in kapha season here. So I didn't have the surgery. I returned 6 months later after getting that diagnosis and had totally cleared it up using diet and lifestyle and herbal medicine. And what shocked me was nobody wanted to know what I had done. And they were just kind of like, you don't have high-grade cervical dysplasia anymore. Everything's clear. See you later. And that really made me think, how many other women are being told that they have to have surgery or they're going to die? They don't know that they have other options. And then they're going down this path of gradually cutting out more pieces of their body or taking medications that they don't actually need or who knows what. And so that's when I was like, I need to go to Ayurveda school and I need to empower other women. So it really stemmed from my own personal experience. And then once I was in Ayurveda school, I started healing all these other things like my allergies and constipation and insomnia. And I was like, this is really exciting. So it lit a fire in me.
Love that. Wow. That's, yeah, very interesting story. And I think we do often get into these healing modalities when we've used it for ourselves and if we've had a positive outcome. Therefore, we're like, oh, we've got to share this with everyone else so we can really help everyone. So, yeah, I had not similar as in a cancer diagnosis, but I went through my own health struggles with hormonal imbalances and gut health after the birth of my twin boys. And Ayurveda's something that really supported me through that time. And so I feel that a lot of us who are called to Ayurveda and to this path, it's usually from our own needs first, and then we can go and share that with the world. So yeah, I've had similar entry into
Absolutely.
Ayurveda.
Yeah. And you mentioned that it was after the birth of, you have twins.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a twin,
Who are
just
you? Oh,
interestingly.
yeah.
And yeah, and that postpartum window is so pivotal. And so I work with a lot of women who are mostly in the Vata stage of life. And so we can trace a lot of times imbalances back to that postpartum time. And if there's not that recovery, I applaud you for seeking out what you needed to rebalance during that time, because if you don't, it, exacerbates later in life. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so when we're looking at the Ayurvedic perspective of aging, how does Ayurveda view it differently than Western medicine or Western culture even?
Yeah. Well, I would say broad, big picture perspective, Ayurveda views aging as a gift and an honor and a really awesome rite of passage, whereas Western culture views it as a failure and something that you want to avoid at all costs.
Yeah, I think what I see with a lot of women that I have in my clinic is they feel their identity is shifting, but one to feeling like more of a burden or not noticed in society. Because in our Western culture, like youth and beauty and all of those things that we were gifted in our 20s and 30s are still seen as like this hierarchy of greatness. And I always mention that it's this, like, as you mentioned, that rite of passage, it's this stepping into what I call as that wise womanhood era. And it's actually where you deepen the inner beauty and that inner connection to self. And it's looked at through the Ayurvedic lens is really celebrated. We go to those women of wisdom and they have so much within them that their inner beauty is so radiant as well, because they're really starting to get more in tune with that sort of soul level, spiritual level of who they are, and finally, being able to express exactly who they are. And that can only come when we can let go of those Western ideals and Western expectations. And I admit, living in a Western culture, and I live on the Gold Coast, which is very much, I don't know, probably like LA in America or something like that. It is very body focused and it is very materialistic. And you do get caught up in that. And like I said, even for myself, knowing that I am starting to enter those sort of mid-years, I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, what do I have to do to sort of hold on to that bit of youth? And so I do see the struggle and I completely understand it, but I feel for a lot of women who don't have that strong sense of self struggle with it even more so. So in the West, I guess, it's often seen as something to fight or something to reverse. So how can we shift our perspective to honor the aging as a sacred process rather than something we fear?
Great question. I'm here to start a revolution. Maybe you'll join me.
Love that.
I think a lot of it has to do with connecting with other women and not separating ourselves. So I see as we are able to, perimenopause, I feel like is just now kind of in the mainstream conversation of like, this starts even in your late 30s and there's a shift that happens, and what that looks like individually for each person is a bit different, but everybody's going through shifts and changes. And if we can talk with our girlfriends, if we can be part of women's circles, if we can take group classes from people like me and you that are helping people celebrate and learn from and appreciate where they are in their trajectory of evolution. It's like, what a gift that we get to evolve in this way and we get to learn from it. So I think that's the biggest piece there. And I think too, just recognizing that self-care. So if we look at like the phases of life that, childhood into maybe early 20s, we could say is kapha stage of life. And then pitta is when we're really on fire, like we're building everything and, our career, our home, a community, maybe a family apart from our family of origin. And there's so much external focus and material focus. It's like be of this reality of like amassing wealth or material goods or whatever it is. And there's so much pressure and intensity and even competition that shifts when we start going into this perimenopausal change. And we can start to feel like we don't recognize ourselves, like what's going on. And it might show up as, things where we're not as good at multitasking or we're needing more rest, or we get to a point. I mean, one of the things that I see a lot is that people just get really discerning about where they're willing to put their energy and where they're not. They're not trying to show up for everything anymore. But it's kind of like their BS meter goes off, and they're just like, I have no tolerance anymore for any of it. And I'm here to be, like you were saying, like more authentically myself. And if we think about that process of graduating from pitta stage of life into vata stage of life, which is ultimately where we're heading over the course of a decade or more, that we're opening up the channel for connection to spirit apart from our connection that we've had to the earth. So we can look at it like the downward moving energy of Apana Vayu that has allowed us to have menstrual cycles and birth children, that starts to dissipate, becomes less frequent. Eventually we go a whole year without having a menstrual cycle, and that's the day of menopause, right? And then we're post-menopausal. And once we're not cycling with a bleeding cycle, then we're cycling with more of a cosmic cycle. And I really encourage people, well, of all ages, to connect with the moon, but especially once you're postmenopausal, because then that lunar cycle is your indicator of the energy cycles. It's much more of a clear path. There's not the menstrual cycle, like is it aligned with the moon or not aligned with the moon, or it's just like you're connected with that monthly rhythm, and it's a really, really beautiful opportunity, I think. So the graceful part, I think, just really comes from that curiosity and excitement. And yeah, there's many other facets, but I'll pause there.
I really liked how you said, what a gift it is to be able to age. And it made me think, like, I have lost a lot of friends or people that I've known in life that haven't had the opportunity to age. And so it really is a gift that we take for granted. So to be able to experience life in every opportunity, in every stage of life, it truly is. That's like what living like a full life is. And I think Ayurveda is so beautiful at being able to help people with living the quality of that full long life. And that's where we speak of the word Ayurveda. It's like the study and knowledge of life and longevity, because we don't just want a long life if it's not great quality. And I think that's what Ayurveda really sort of leans itself to, is being able to improve the quality of our life as we're living. So we are aging gracefully. Can you explain how the elements, so in Ayurveda, we look at the 5 elements. We've got earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And each of those 5 elements make up the doshas. Just for those who are listening and might be a bit new to Ayurveda, and have jumped on to this podcast, they're like, well, what are these concepts they're talking about? But can you explain how these elements correlate to the different life stages?
Sure. Yeah. So those 5 elements combine in pairs to make each of the doshas. So vata is made up of ether and air. So it's dry, light, cold, mobile, subtle, rough. Some of those adjectives might resonate with those of you who are postmenopausal. You may be like, yeah, that describes me right now. So, and then pitta is made up of fire and water, and it's hot, sharp, spreading, bright. Kapha is made up of earth and water, and it's heavy, dense, cool, cloudy, soft. So these qualities show up. So we start out our lives in kapha. Dosha is predominant in that stage of life. That doesn't mean everybody's kapha predominant in their constitution, but that life stage is overseen by kapha dosha. So it's where we're growing. Think about how much you grow. A person grows from being born until they're like 20 years old, like a lot. So it's the actual physical tissue, the bone. Ideally, during that stage of life, we're also given like a strong bedrock, like a place where we belong in the world, a home and a family where we feel very nurtured and supported. Now, that doesn't always happen for everybody. And so then we have imbalances that come in from that early stage. But that childhood time is like deep, deep nourishment, ideally, through all the avenues. So Pha moves into Pitta stage of life. This is and the transition that we go through in our teen years of puberty, we're transitioning. That starts like a 10-year cycle of transitioning from kapha stage of life into pitta stage of life. So it's kind of interesting there. Often, we'll have some development, like breasts for women start to develop. And then a bit after that, we'll start our period. And then it's like 10 years after that is kind of like when we're like, our cycles are more regular and we know how to kind of read our body. A lot of people go on birth control pills and kind of mess up that whole thing too. But so that first shift, hormonal shift, we call puberty, is that shift from kapha into the pitta stage of life. And so then pitta stage of life is what I was saying before. It's like we're full on the fire and water elements. Like we're trying to find our flow and be in our brilliance and, get out there and make it all happen. And burnout can happen really easily during this time because we just push from a perspective of being an Ayurvedic practitioner, like I see people all the time that have been in the mode of caring for everybody else, especially during this phase of life. And self-care feels like a very foreign and perhaps even selfish thing to do. So we may have a midlife crisis, we may hit burnout, we may get a scary diagnosis, and that often wakes us up if we're living out of balance. And then this shift starts happening that leads us towards no longer having a menstrual cycle. So we can think of it as the second puberty. And so it's a hormonal shift that happens over the course of about 10 years that leads us to no longer having a cycle. So at that point, we're kind of weaving in and out and eventually leading from pitta to vata stage of life. And that time is what we were talking about before, a little more of like a reflective time of like, is what I'm doing with my life meaningful? Is it worthwhile? It's often when we start having a little bit more of a sense of our own morality as well as mortality. So we're like, is what I'm doing meaningful? Is it fulfilling? Is it connective? Am I satisfied with my life, with who I am? How would I like to grow and change at this point? And then also recognizing that we're not going to live forever. And we may be, through this period of perimenopause, most women in the Western cultures start or reach that menopausal point, which is a year without having a menstrual cycle, around 51. And so, at that point, it's like I'm probably at least halfway through my life. And that awareness is kind of sobering. And again, it's like, that downward moving energy gets released. And then we have this opening up of the Sushumna Nadi, this central energy channel. It's like we can connect more with spirit. We can be more aware of, this earthly realm is not permanent for us. We're not going to be here forever. How do we want to give back? And then we move into Vata stage of life, which is more about legacy or what feels authentically meaningful to us, and less about materialism. So you'll see people as they move through Vata stage of life, by the time they're in their 70s, 80s, they're often giving away a lot of their material possessions or downsizing their homes, or, they're just like, this doesn't matter anymore to me. What matters is these really special connections I have with people. And, I really enjoy eating good food and moving my body. And, so I think honoring those shifts, and that also Vata stage of life carries so much wisdom. And this is where I think we fail, not only our elders, but ourselves, is that we're not sitting at their feet receiving their wisdom. We're too busy. They're irrelevant. They don't know how to use the technology, so we're not going to bother. And so there is this kind of sidelining of people as they age. And yet they have so much wisdom those stages we can also look at, like from that early kapha stage is sometimes called the brahmacharya stage, which is sometimes, it's one of the yamas too. And we can see that as we can call it, celibacy if we want to, but it's also just like the student phase. It's the phase of learning and figuring out like kind of how to be in this world, right? And then that pitta stage is often called the grihastha stage. It's like the city dweller. It's like really engaging with the material world. And then we move into, there's kind of two Vata stages. The first is called the forest dweller. And so you can think of this as like somebody moving out of the city into the forest, but they're kind of coming back and visiting the city, right? So like most of us are not like retiring at 51, we're not, I'm getting close. I'll be 47 next month. So it's like, I'm not planning to be like, oh, I'm like just going to peace out at 51, but we're starting to move in that direction, of like, I need a little more like time in meditation, or I like my walks in nature, or I want to really focus on, my growth in this way, or even creative endeavors, less focused on like more of the linear thinking. And then there's the final Vata stage, which is the cave dweller. And so when we think about like the yogis of yore, like living in caves, it's like that's more the energy of it, of like meditating and preparing to leave this realm that we've been in, and reflecting, sharing wisdom, and simplifying. Yeah. And getting lighter, like spirit gets lighter.
I do see that a lot of women who are transitioning through the pitta phase to the early Vata phase, that they are experiencing hormonal shifts, which is natural, of course, but a lot of stress and exhaustion. And as you mentioned, like that burnout, they've been like the caregiver for so long, and finally something switches in them and they're like, no, this is my time. I really need to look after myself, my health, and what I have been avoiding for so long. And so often they're searching for this sort of new path forward. What are some daily Ayurvedic rituals that can help in our modern world within this transition for women to bring in more ease and stability into their life?
Yeah. Well, there's so much from Ayurveda that is so simple and so powerful. And so some of it has to do with just having a schedule. And so I would say, like, when I just heard you say that, I was like, my top 3 are like, make sure you eat a really nourishing lunch, go to bed by 10 p.m. and wake up before the sunrise. If you were to just do those 3 things and not snack, yeah, I think that you would see some hormonal relief, regulation there, balancing happen. And each of those pieces is really about living in rhythm with nature. And some of those things will shift, like when sunrise is happening, shifts throughout the year. You're going to sleep more in the winter and get up earlier in the summer. Those pieces are really key, and to recognize that we are a part of nature and that nothing we can do will divorce us from. So even if we're like, I have electric lights, I can stay up till any hour of the night. Like, no, actually, we're diurnal creatures, not nocturnal. And so I think, some of it is, if people are experiencing weight gain, like this is something that happens really commonly through the fizz and fizz. And I think the key here is to recognize, like, how are we aligning with the solar energy? Because our digestion and metabolism follows the solar energy. So we know that the solar energy is strongest between 10 and 2 in the daytime. Can we eat, most of our intake during that time and then have a very small meal at the end of the day? Tending to your digestive fire, I think, is key. We know as practicing Ayurveda, like really, making sure that the digestive fire is functioning well. And for a lot of folks, by the time they're in their 40s, it's pretty compromised if they haven't, done a gentle detox or a kindling of that digestive fire. And so, yeah, really, really tuning into like some deep noticing. I think the noticing, like being like, yeah, does it feel like when I eat, there's a rock in my stomach, or I have to run to the bathroom right away? Or, that we do want to recognize that we can move towards ease. I think one of the sad things that happens often is that we have normalized the imbalances. So we say it's normal to gain weight and have hot flashes and to have insomnia and headaches and joint pain and any of the other things. And it's not. Just because it's happening for everybody else doesn't mean that it's normal in the sense that it's the expression of health. It's not. And I often talk about Ayurveda being this path of ease. And when we are living in alignment with our constitutions, with our life stages, with the seasons, we create ease. And when we're not living in that flow, we're in dis-ease. And the exciting part of that is that at any point we can choose to shift what we're doing. And sometimes it's simple little shifts, like just gradually dialing back what time you're going to bed each night, or, making a shift to eat more leafy greens gradually, little by little. Over time, that compiles and compounds into making such a big difference for your health. And then that creates, a vote for who you're becoming in the future, And in Ayurveda, we say, oh, sorry.
I was going to say, on that nutrition piece, is there any Ayurvedic foods or herbs that you feel really support the graceful aging?
Well, it's very individual. And I will say that there's some really great herbs that, and I'm going to say this with the caveat that we always want to look at who we're talking about when they're, engaging with these foods and herbs, and then how much of them. So this isn't just going to be like a blanket, like everybody go out there and do this. But I'll share some things that I think are really helpful as general principles. Some herbs that are really helpful. One is shatavari, which is known as a pitta reducing herb that has an affinity for the female reproductive system. And that is especially helpful as we're navigating the perimenopausal shifts. I don't know if you've seen, or if your listeners have seen the charts of what happens with hormones in perimenopause. It's like when you're cycling normally, it's like there's this estrogen little like hump, and then the progesterone comes in at ovulation and it comes down and you bleed, and then it starts, and then you go into perimenopause, and these just go like all over the place, right?
Yeah, literally.
And so,
roller coaster ride.
yes, it's like a wild, wacky roller coaster ride. You're right. And so what I do in my practice is look a lot more at like what the specific symptoms are, rather than just being like, oh, you're in perimenopause, do this, right? It's like, are we cooling things down? You know, are there hot flashes going on? Are we having mood swings? Is there insomnia? So, but overall, I would say Shatavari, Brahmi is another really great herb that's really helpful for the mind. It's not dulling to the mind, it's clarifying to the mind. So if you're dealing with like brain fog or overwhelm, Brahmi can be really, really helpful. Sometimes ashwagandha can be really synergistic with Shatavari, and it's an adaptogen. It gained popularity for a while, specifically for men's reproductive health, but it's really an awesome adaptogen that is very helpful for vata imbalance. So if it's combined with Shatavari's Pitta Pratyanika herb, and then ashwagandha is for vata. So that's a very nice combination. And those three together, Shatavari, Brahmi, and ashwagandha, can be really, really wonderful. And, you know, it really depends on what's showing up. Do you have herbs that you would add to that list?
No, I was going to say those three are amazing for the women that I see as well, and the three together, because herbs often work really well when they're synchronized, and even adding something like licorice into like the herb licorice, that really can accentuate the effects of the herbs as well. So when you combine different herbs, you can get even more of an effect sometimes, which is, really beautiful. But I have definitely used a lot more Brahmi lately for the brain fog, and it has just been so beautiful. I mean, there are other herbs not so specific to Ayurveda, but like rhodiola, black cohosh is really good for hot flashes and things like that. But I think those three would be some of the staple herbs for sure that I have in my clinic, and even medicinal herbs for the kitchen. So things like fenugreek, fennel, they can all be really amazing. Fenugreek's very good for the menopausal transition, perimenopausal transition as well. So I like to give herbs and spices that women can also cook with, because they're so effective. Like, we don't need to really even take it in a tablet form all the time. We can have it in teas, or we can have it in our cooking. I mean, obviously the turmeric for if there's inflammation, if there's a lot of fluid retention, we might look at adding some more celery into their dishes and stuff like that. Yeah, I think they're wonderful staple herbs. But like you said, everyone's so individual. And so we have to be mindful when we are listening to information on a podcast that we're not just be, okay, out I go to go get my ashwagandha, Brahmi, and Shatavari, and I'm all set, because, that might not suit your constitution. But I do, really appreciate that wisdom, because they are pretty good blanket herbs.
Yeah. And those three are pretty gentle too.
Exactly.
Some other herbs would be like, talk to somebody before you try them out. Yeah. And food wise, I think it's important to recognize moving from Pitta stage of life into Vata stage of life will generally make your digestion a little more variable, and especially if you're Pitta predominant and you're used to being able to digest anything, it can be a shock to move into Vata stage of life and be like, why am I like gassy or bloated like all of a sudden? And so I do think simplifying what we eat is really helpful. And if you're used to eating a lot of raw food, to gear more towards more cooked and even one pot meals, like soups, stews that are, I love Dr. Robert Svoboda. Do you know him? Who's an Ayurvedic teacher from the US. He says foods that are cooked together work out their differences in the pot. And I love that, because often we'll have foods that are, cooked separately, and then we put them together in our stomachs. And if our digestive fire isn't super strong, it's not always, even if the food combining is okay in terms of the actual foods, the that combining in the belly can sometimes be problematic. So having the foods that have already worked out their differences in the pot can be really nice.
That's so cute as well.
Yeah.
Such a cute saying.
Yeah, so that can be really nice. So root vegetables are generally really helpful. Simple grains, brown rice, quinoa.
I don't think we can get through a whole aging gracefully episode without discussing the external skin, because I think when people think of anti-aging, it's always like, what serums can I use? Like, what can I do to make my face look more youthful and younger, my skin to look more glowing and better? So from an Ayurvedic perspective, are there any like rasana rejuvenation therapies and oils or skincare that you like to use or have seen really effective in this graceful aging period of our life?
Yeah, I would say this isn't an area that I have a whole lot of expertise, although I do encourage my clients, and this is what I do for myself too, is that I don't put anything on my skin that I wouldn't put in my mouth. And so I think that that is in principle just a really good thing to think about. Like, our skin is our main detoxification organ, and it's also a way that we can take in a lot. There's a lot of products out there and they claim to do lots of things. And I think we can do well by our skin by, not getting sunburned. And hydration is such a key piece too. And as we move into more of the Vata stage of life, there will be a bit of drying out that happens. And so keeping the skin hydrated through oil, I think is really fabulous. And again, depending on your constitution and the season of the year, sesame seed oil is definitely like great for Vata predominant bodies. And maybe as you move into Vata stage of life, you find that sesame feels way better to you. Coconut oil is generally great for Pitta or to use in the summertime. And then mustard seed oil or sunflower oil can be really nice for Kapha predominant folks or in Kapha stage of life. So those are kind of some general things. I have been trying some products lately from the Ayurveda Experience and from Kerala Ayurveda. They have some like specific face oils, but I mean, I don't really do anything fancy specifically, but I think it's really also about what's happening inside, So like our skin is a reflection of our ojas, our essential vitality sap, right? So if we have good Agni, because even if we're eating good food, but we can't digest and assimilate it, doesn't really matter. So we want to have healthy Agni. We want to eat really high quality foods, mostly vegetables, and really great beneficial fats like ghee, and make sure that we're staying hydrated, not just from water, but also through oils and fats. And so that becomes even more important as we're aging. We're not going to be as flexible in terms of just like eating whatever, whenever. And so, yeah, really dialing in that tending to the body vessel so lovingly, I just think is really powerful. And you can certainly do some like, cleanser, like sugar scrubs or oatmeal baths and things like that. But I don't know if that's helpful.
Oh, absolutely. No, I love that. Thank you. You've shared so much wonderful tips and beautiful wisdom, like from a really holistic perspective, which is what Ayurveda is, and being able to align our natural rhythms with nature and being more in tune to ourselves as well. So thank you for all of that. I guess to wrap it up, what would be one piece of wisdom that you really want the women listening to this to take away from this discussion today?
I would just like everybody listening to know that you're never stuck. And if you can listen to the whispers or the signals, the communication from your body, that is the greatest gift, and to connect with that in friendship and to move from that place of like, oh, wow, I'm having a hot flash or bloating or a headache or whatever, and not be like, body, whip it into shape, but to be like, sweet body, what do you need that I'm not aware of right now? And I think this is where, working with somebody who practices Ayurveda can be really helpful. It's really a journey in befriending yourself and just remembering that you're never stuck and there's multiple ways to navigate at any point. And so get curious, get excited. It's an awesome journey. You'll learn so much.
Thank you so much. And where can people find you, your programs, your retreats, all of that good stuff?
Everything's on my website, which is heartfeltwellbeing.com. That's my business, Heartfelt Wellbeing, and that's all just strung together, heartfeltwellbeing.com. And you can take a dosha quiz there. There's a free sleep guide. And then there's information about all of my programs. I lead a year-long online program for women. So we go through every season of the year, and that's group. And then I also provide one-on-ones within that. And then I do, detoxes and retreats. I'm not sure that any of this aligns for people who are in your part of the world, however, because it is so structured by season and we're opposite of you all. However, I do have lots of YouTube videos and, just learning about the different doshas and the seasons and how to balance. You can learn a lot. So you can sign up for my newsletter and just wait till I'm sending stuff out right now about springtime. You all are going into the autumn. So not necessarily helpful in the moment, but hold on to it till next spring and tune in. And you can also follow me on Instagram, Heartfelt Wellbeing there. So
beautiful.
Thank
you so much. And thank you to everyone who listened to this episode. If you found it helpful, please share it with another woman so we can all age gracefully. If you are in the health and wellness space, if you're a healer, yoga teacher, health practitioner, I do have a free intro to Ayurveda masterclass for health and wellness professionals, and the link will be in the show notes. And on that note, thank you very much. Until next time, honor your body, embrace your journey, and keep evolving into your higher self.